the bus trundled along the winding roads toward Lincoln Heights, Missouri, its engine humming a low, constant lullaby. Dorian pressed his face against the cool glass, watching the urban chaos dissolve into uniform, cookie-cutter suburbs, a landscape as impersonal as it was monotonous. Though he'd been the new kid before, this relocation bore a different weight. His mother's new opportunity had uprooted him, and his uncle had urged him to embrace a fresh start. Yet, fresh beginnings were elusive when you bore the mark of difference in a town that prized sameness. Stepping onto the campus of the local high school, Dorian immediately sensed the unspoken judgment, a sudden, collective hush that fell over clusters of chatter as eyes flickered his way before darting away. Teachers greeted him with smiles that never quite reached their eyes and voices measured to avoid any real warmth. Still, he moved through his first classes with quiet determination, answering questions and focusing intently on his work, as if his calm could stave off the storm lurking just beneath the surface. By noon, an unsettling sensation had crept under his skin, a prickling awareness of countless eyes lingering on him like stray needles. Clutching his tray, Dorian scanned the crowded cafeteria where lively groups bantered and laughed, their conversations a fortress from which he felt eternally excluded. Then, amid the clamor, he spied a solitary empty seat beside a boy so absorbed in his phone that his detachment seemed almost deliberate. It wasn't ideal, but it was a haven in a sea of exclusion. Barely had Dorian set his tray down when a voice, slick with mockery, sliced through the din. "You lost," it drawled. The speaker was a blond kid with an easy, cocky grin, reclining as though life itself were a perpetual joke. His companions, an indistinct mix of grinning onlookers, seemed to savor the moment. Dorian exhaled slowly, as if to steady his inner calm, while the kid quipped, "Didn't know you needed a map around here." Behind that playful ribbing, however, Dorian detected an unspoken hesitance, a hint that this wasn't just idle banter. Locking eyes with the blonde, Dorian maintained an unreadable expression. "Guess I'm the exception," the kid continued, his grin morphing into something that danced between amusement and reluctant admiration. "Welcome to Ridgemont, man." Dorian said nothing. Instead, he quietly resumed his meal, an unspoken promise echoing in the silence that followed. This was merely the prologue. But subtle stares and whispered jabs soon fermented into more sinister gestures. In the hushed corridors, fragments of conversation drifted like bitter wind. "They really let someone like him in, and I wonder how long he'll last." Each disparaging comment, though faint, stung sharply. Dorian, intent on his studies, dismissed these as the clamor of small minds, and yet one person noticed everything. Bryce Tanner, with his self-assured swagger and an entourage that trailed him like shadows, was a force unto himself. His status was cemented by the power his family wielded and the unspoken rule that he was untouchable, the golden boy, the quarterback, the one who never faced consequences. For reasons known only to him, Bryce saw Dorian's mere presence as a challenge. The first overt test came at Dorian's locker. As he methodically swapped his textbooks, an abrupt collision sent him staggering forward, his shoulder slammed against the cold metal with a resounding clang that reverberated down the hall. "Oops," Bryce chimed in, his tone sugary sweet and feigned innocent, "didn't see you there." Dorian's reaction was measured. He finished retrieving his notebook and closed his locker with deliberate calm, every movement controlled so as not to give Bryce the satisfaction of a reaction. Bryce's sneer persisted. "You're quiet, huh?" "Real cool," he taunted. Dorian briefly met his gaze, not with fury, but with an almost imperceptible challenge, while Bryce's smirk wavered momentarily. One of his cronies, Nick, or maybe Kyle, it was hard to tell, mumbled something, prompting Bryce to add with a grin, "Catch you later, new guy." The corridor's noise swelled back to life, but Dorian's mind was already steeling itself for what was to come. Later, while making his way toward the trash cans in the bustling cafeteria, fate intervened again. A deliberate, outstretched foot aimed at him sent his body lurching, threatening to upend his balance. With reflexes honed by years of discipline, he recovered just in time. Bryce's laughter rang out, hands raised in a mock gesture of surrender. "Relax, man, it was just a joke." Dorian, refusing to dignify the act with a response, simply stepped over the provocation. Yet behind the laughter, a deeper malice simmered. His uncle's voice echoed in his mind, "A lion doesn't flinch when the hyenas bark." Dorian exhaled slowly, determined to let the insult slide, but deep inside, he knew that wasn't enough to silence his tormentors. The third provocation came on a cool afternoon after school. Dorian had lingered in the library, content with the quiet, until he stepped into a nearly deserted parking lot. The sparse crowd and the fading daylight lent an eerie calm to the scene. He wasn't in a hurry, his mother's return was still hours away. Then, familiar voices sliced through the stillness. "Hey, new guy." Before Dorian could brace himself, a heavy blow struck his back with unyielding force. The impact nearly sent him tumbling, but he managed to catch himself, his body rigid with controlled shock. Laughter erupted as he slowly turned. There stood Bryce, flanked by Nick, Kyle, and a few others whose names dissolved into insignificance. Bryce clutched a drink cup, its last sticky drops clinging to his fingers, and with a faint tone said, "Damn, my bad, didn't see you there." A quick glance revealed Dorian's hoodie now splattered with soda, ice clinking around his feet like cruel punctuation. The onlooker's silence was deafening. Steadying his breath, Dorian faced Bryce, whose smirk widened as he goaded, "Come on, man, say something." But Dorian kept walking, head bowed against the onslaught of ridicule. That was the moment Bryce escalated. With a shove that was neither playful nor accidental, he sent Dorian stumbling backward. For a brief, charged moment, time seemed to slow. Dorian's face remained an impassive mask, his hands flexing subtly at his sides, a silent promise of resolve. Bryce burst into raucous laughter. "What, you scared?" he jeered. Nick stepped forward with a mocking grin. "Nah, man, he's just soft." For years, Dorian had been told to walk away, his uncle's admonition ringing in his ears, "Keep your hands in your pockets. Don't give them what they want." But Bryce was not after an easy laugh, he craved a reaction, a demonstration of his dominance. Taking one last measured breath, Dorian set his backpack down with deliberate calm. Bryce raised an eyebrow in challenge. "Oh, you got something to say now?" Dorian's reply was silent, he simply rolled his shoulders back. Bryce's chuckle filled the air, confident that his provocation had succeeded. Then, in one fluid, unexpected motion, Dorian struck. A quick, crisp left feint drew Bryce in, only to be met by a lightning-fast right hook that slammed into Bryce's rib. The sickening crack of bone punctuated the silence as Bryce's breath caught in a strangled gasp. Not stopping there, Dorian pivoted seamlessly into a devastating uppercut. Bryce's head jerked violently backward before his legs buckled, sending him sprawling onto the cold, unforgiving pavement. A stunned hush descended over the parking lot. Nick and the others stood frozen, mouths agape. Dorian stepped back, adjusted his hoodie with clinical precision, and maintained a calm, measured breath. Bryce groaned on the ground, rolling onto his side, as Dorian finally asked, "You done?" Bryce could only muster a cough in reply. Surveying the immobile group, Dorian quietly slung his backpack over his shoulder and walked away, without a word, without a backward glance. Yet that fateful encounter was merely the opening chapter of something far more profound. The very next morning, whispers and sidelong glances filled the corridors of the school. Dorian didn't need to check his phone to know, the way students stared at him, the curious pause on the stairs, all spoke volumes. The attention was no longer merely speculative, some faces shone with awe, others with trepidation, and a few regarded him as if they were witnessing him for the very first time. It came as no shock that Bryce was absent that day. Taking such a blow in front of half the parking lot was not something one could easily recover from overnight. Old cronies like Nick and Kyle kept their distance, and though Dorian entered his classes as if nothing had changed, the cafeteria told a different story. As he passed through, conversation stilled, replaced by quiet nods of newfound respect. Freshmen who'd barely exchanged a word with him now treated him like a legend. Murmurs rippled through the room. "Damn, didn't know the new guy had hands," someone remarked, while another voice declared, "Bryce had it coming," and yet another whispered, "He's not coming back for a week." Dorian remained unmoved by their chatter. He wasn't seeking hero status, nor was he in it for validation. But not all voices sang his praises. As he took his seat at lunch, a softer, venomous tone floated by. He's just another violent thug. Dorian turned his head slightly, catching sight of a pair of girls at a nearby table, one brunette adorned with expensive jewelry, her expression twisted as though she'd caught a whiff of something foul. They quickly averted their eyes, but the damage was done. His stomach clenched. Moments like these were inescapable. No matter how justified you were, there was always someone ready to contort the truth. Yet, Dorian harbored no regret. Bryce had actively sought confrontation, and Dorian had merely defended himself. The weight of every lesson learned, years of grueling training, of exercising self-control, of choosing to walk away when necessary, settled upon him. That was not weakness, it was hard-earned strength. Still, the lingering judgments made him wonder why every decision seemed predestined by the perceptions of others. He was about to discover, however, that genuine power wasn't confined to a single punch, it was woven into what came next. In the days that followed, the memory of that brutal confrontation hung in the air like a stubborn fog. Bryce remained conspicuously absent, his friends gradually ceasing their taunts, and the once harsh whispers softened to a distant murmur. Yet an unspoken tension persisted, a reminder that the battle was far from over. One afternoon, as the gym's echo faded behind him, Coach Harrison called Dorian over with a tone that brooked no refusal. Although Dorian had no appetite for another lecture, something in the coach's measured cadence made him pause. Together, they stepped outside near the track where the football team was finishing practice. "I heard what happened," the coach began, his voice low and reflective. "Figured you had your reasons." Dorian merely nodded, his silence conveying more than words could. The coach's gaze was piercing as he observed him. "You're a fighter," he stated, to which Dorian offered a quiet shrug. "Been boxing since I was a kid." A low whistle escaped the coach. "That much is obvious. But tell me, did that fight change anything?" Unsure of where the conversation was leading, Dorian listened as the coach crossed his arms. "Do you think Bryce learned anything? Or that the others did?" Dorian exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair as he contemplated the cycle of cruelty and fleeting victories. "People like Bryce," the coach continued, "don't really lose, not in any meaningful way. He'll come back, and the cycle will start again. But you have control." Dorian frowned. "What are you saying?" The coach tilted his head, gesturing toward the field. "I've been pushing the boxing coach to bring over a few kids for wrestling. Ever thought of channeling all that skill into something greater?" For a moment, Dorian was silent, his mind racing. Then the wrestling coach's approving grin surfaced in his memory. "I know you can hold your own," came the silent challenge, "but there's a vast difference between merely winning a fight and truly owning your power. I've seen too many kids trapped by a reputation they never wanted." The coach's eyes locked onto Dorian's. "You've already proven you're not to be messed with. Now, show them there's more to you than this cycle of violence." That night, alone in his room with only the soft hum of the night for company, Dorian stared at his uncle's old boxing gloves. Every scar, every moment of restraint, each time he'd chosen to walk away, flashed before him. In that quiet vigil, he understood, while Bryce would never change, he still had a choice. Real strength wasn't just about knowing when to fight, it was about deciding what was worth fighting for. The road ahead was uncertain, lined with challenges both old and new. But in that silent, resolute moment, Dorian sensed the stirring of a transformation, a promise that his power, tempered by control and purpose, could redefine not only his own destiny but also the very way the world saw him.